You've been lied to about depression, especially if you're over 60. They've painted it in soft colors, made it sound like a passing cloud, a sad chapter in the book of life. They've told you it's just part of aging. They've told you to accept it. But I'm telling you now, as a doctor who's watched it unfold from inches away, that's the most dangerous lie of them all. In the next few minutes, you're about to uncover the hidden truths about depression, how it quietly develops, the ways it affects your mind and body, and why it can be far more dangerous than most people realize. This isn't exaggeration or hype. This is backed by decades of research, clinical experience, and real-world evidence. Stay with me until the very end, and you'll know exactly what signs to watch for, and how to have the right conversation with your doctor, so you can protect your mind, preserve your memories, and maintain your independence for years to come. Depression is not simply feeling sad. It's not a phase. It's not just being in a funk. In seniors, it's a biological storm that moves slowly but relentlessly, rewiring your thoughts, twisting your perception of reality, and breaking down your body from the inside out. I've seen it take the sharpest minds, the strongest personalities, and hollow them into quiet shells who no longer recognize themselves. And the cruelest part? In older adults, it hides. It wears masks. It slips into daily life without a sound. You don't see it coming because it doesn't announce itself with tears and breakdowns. No, it comes as fatigue. It comes as I'm just slowing down. It comes as a loss of interest in the things you used to love, disguised as maturity or life changes. And by the time anyone notices, it's already burrowed deep. I've walked into homes where the blinds haven't been opened in months. I've seen coffee cups left half full on kitchen counters because there was no reason to finish them. I've spoken to people who stopped answering the phone, not because they didn't care, but because the thought of conversation felt heavier than lifting a stone. And every time the same quiet excuses emerge. I'm fine, just tired. You know how it is at my age. I'm not sad, I'm just slowing down. But here's what nobody tells you: that slowing down can be the brain's chemistry falling apart. It's not a personality change. It's not a quirk. And it's not weakness. It's disease. The same way heart disease clogs arteries or arthritis wears down joints, depression in seniors alters the brain's circuits, literally changing the way it functions. It's inflammation in the very organ that controls who you are. I once treated a retired school principal. Brilliant man, respected in the community. He came in for what he thought was memory trouble, forgetting small things, misplacing names. He had no history of depression, no history of psychiatric issues. His physical health was solid for his age. But over time, I noticed something in his voice. It had flattened. No rise, no warmth. His stories no longer had a point. They just drifted into silence. When I asked how he was feeling emotionally, he shrugged. Fine, he said. Just getting old. It wasn't age. It was depression. A form so quiet it had slipped past his family, his friends, even himself. By the time we diagnosed it, it had already been eating away at his cognitive function for years. That's the thing about late-life depression. It doesn't just rob you of joy. It accelerates memory decline. It primes the brain for dementia. It makes the body more vulnerable to heart attacks, strokes, even cancer. And yet society still treats it like a phase you can snap out of. The truth is, depression after 60 can be more dangerous than in any other decade of life, because it doesn't act alone. It teams up with every other weakness your body has collected over the years. It magnifies pain, slows healing, disrupts sleep, and weakens the immune system. And if it's ignored, it can push you toward a place you swore you'd never go. A place where you question whether life is worth the effort. What makes it worse is the stigma. Older generations grew up with a dangerous rule. Don't talk about your feelings. Push through it. Don't be weak. So when depression comes knocking, they bolt the door and try to endure it in silence. I've had patients who would rather suffer in bed for months than admit they feel hopeless. They'll tell me about their arthritis, their blood pressure, their cholesterol, but never their emptiness. That silence is exactly what depression feeds on. I remember visiting a patient at home, a woman in her late 70s. Her husband had passed 2 years earlier. Her children lived out of state. The living room was immaculate, every photo frame dusted, every cushion straightened, but when I sat with her, she barely made eye contact. I asked her how her days looked. She told me she wakes at 10 a.m., makes tea, sits by the window, and just watches. No TV, no music, no books, just the street, sometimes for hours. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She simply existed. That's what people don't understand. Depression in seniors often doesn't look like sadness. It looks like emptiness. And here's the twist. Sometimes, even doctors miss it, because when you're treating someone over 60, you're trained to expect fatigue, slower thinking, lower energy. It becomes easy to write off these signs as normal aging. But they're not. If you could see the brain scans, you'd see reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex. You'd see changes in the hippocampus. You'd see inflammation markers in the blood. Depression leaves fingerprints. There's another cruel trick it plays. It changes your perception, so you believe the lie that nothing can help. You tell yourself, "I've lived my life, it's too late to feel better." You convince yourself that seeking treatment is pointless. That's the disease talking. That's not you, because biologically, the brain remains capable of recovery at any age. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire, does not expire when you turn 60. I've seen people in their 80s and 90s reclaim joy, memory, and clarity once we treated the underlying depression. But none of that happens if the silence wins. That's why I'm telling you this now, because maybe no one else will. If you've noticed that the days feel heavier, if you've stopped caring about the little rituals that used to matter, if you're withdrawing from people not because you're angry, but because you're tired of pretending, then this is not something to brush aside. This is not just life. This is a medical emergency disguised as aging. The cost of ignoring it is too high. It can steal your independence. It can push you into a hospital bed for reasons you never connected to your mood. It can erode the years you thought you still had to live fully. And worst of all, it can make you believe you don't deserve to fight for them. I want you to understand, you are not too old for recovery. You are not too old to feel alive again. But you have to recognize the enemy before you can fight it. And right now, the enemy's greatest weapon is your silence. Because what's coming next is the part nobody wants to hear. The part where I show you exactly what this disease is doing to your body, while you think it's just in your head. And once you see it, you'll never be able to look at depression the same way again. You think you know what's wrong, but your body's already telling a different story. When depression takes root in the later years of life, it doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how your body works, cell by cell, heartbeat by heartbeat. Most people think it lives only in the mind, tucked away in thoughts and feelings. They think if they can just think more positively, it will go away. But what they don't realize is that by the time depression shows itself, it's already running a deeper game, one that reaches far beyond mood. It becomes a silent saboteur of every system in your body. It starts in the brain, but it doesn't stay there. When the mind is under siege, it sends distress signals to every organ through a web of chemical messengers and hormones. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, begins to flood your bloodstream in short bursts. Cortisol can help you survive, but when it stays high for weeks, months, even years, it becomes poison. It eats away at brain cells, especially in the hippocampus, the very structure that stores your memories and helps you learn new things. Imagine your brain's filing cabinet, slowly burning from the inside out. That's what chronic depression does. It weakens the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and control over impulses. It dulls your ability to plan, to concentrate, to weigh options clearly. And then there's the amygdala, your brain's emotional alarm system. In depression, it doesn't just become more sensitive, it becomes overactive, scanning for threats that aren't there, amplifying fear, hopelessness, and anxiety until they feel inescapable. This isn't just sadness, it's a full neurological hijacking. But the brain is only the first casualty. Depression begins to ripple through the nervous system, and the body responds as if it's under constant attack. Your heart starts to pay the price. Elevated stress hormones cause blood vessels to constrict, increasing blood pressure. Your heart must work harder to push blood through narrower pathways. Over time, this raises the risk of heart disease, arrhythmias, and sudden cardiac events. People think of depression as separate from heart health, but they are deeply intertwined. In seniors, depression can be as deadly to the heart as high cholesterol or smoking. The immune system suffers too. Constant stress and chemical imbalance tell your body to focus on survival, not repair. White blood cells lose efficiency, inflammation markers skyrocket, turning the body's own defense system into a slow, grinding weapon against itself. Chronic inflammation contributes to arthritis flare-ups, worsens diabetes control, slows healing from injuries, and increases vulnerability to infections. It's why some seniors battling depression find themselves sick more often, taking longer to recover from even minor illnesses. The damage doesn't stop there. Bones and muscles, the scaffolding of your independence, are not immune. Depression interferes with the absorption of essential nutrients, while elevated cortisol actively breaks down bone tissue. Over time, this increases the risk of osteoporosis and fractures. Muscle mass declines faster. That's why some older adults lose strength rapidly when depression sets in. They're not just moving less, their bodies are literally dismantling the muscle fibers they need to stand, walk, and live on their own. Then there's the gut. Scientists now know that the gut and brain communicate constantly through what's called the gut-brain axis. Depression can disrupt this communication, altering gut bacteria, slowing digestion, and triggering or worsening gastrointestinal issues. Constipation, bloating, loss of appetite, or sudden weight changes aren't just side effects. They're physical expressions of the same illness affecting your thoughts. And because the gut is a major producer of neurotransmitters, like serotonin, damage here can deepen the depression in a vicious cycle. Even sleep is weaponized against you. Depression alters the body's circadian rhythms, the internal clock that tells you when to sleep and when to wake. You might find yourself waking at 3 in the morning, unable to drift back. Or you might sleep 10 hours and still wake up exhausted. Poor sleep further disrupts hormone balance, increases inflammation, and impairs brain function, making the symptoms of depression even worse. It becomes a downward spiral that's hard to see until you're in the middle of it. And yet, despite all this, people still believe depression is just in your head. They fail to see that it's written in your blood work, visible in your heart rate, reflected in your bone density scans. It leaves fingerprints on every lab test, every physical exam, every unexplained ache that lingers. The body keeps score, and depression is one of its most merciless opponents. What makes this especially dangerous in seniors is the way these physical changes blend with what's already considered normal aging. A little forgetfulness must be age, slower healing. That's just what happens. More fatigue, more aches, more stiffness, nothing to worry about. But behind those symptoms could be a system-wide biological breakdown that is anything but normal. Depression hides in plain sight, using the camouflage of age to keep attacking without resistance. I've seen patients come in for chest pain, only to find the heart was fine, but their depression was crushing them like a physical weight. I've seen others come for treatment of arthritis, who found their pain eased not from new joint medication, but from therapy and antidepressants that lowered inflammation across the body. This is the part the world doesn't see, that treating depression in seniors is not just about improving mood, it's about restoring physical health and slowing the aging process itself. Think about this. A senior with untreated depression has a higher risk of dying from all causes, heart disease, stroke, infections, than a senior without depression. It is not a minor inconvenience. It is a multiplier of risk. And it doesn't matter how tough you've been in the past, or how much you've endured. The biology of this disease does not care about your history. It cares only about spreading its reach. The body's betrayal is not that it wants to harm you. It's that it's trying to adapt to what it thinks is constant danger. Depression tricks the brain into sending out survival signals all the time, and the body obeys, sacrificing long-term health for short-term survival. The tragedy is that the threat isn't real. It's manufactured by a sick brain, and yet the damage to the heart, the immune system, the bones, the gut, the muscles, is very real. If you could see what I've seen under the microscope, if you could watch neurons shrivel from chemical stress, if you could see the plaque forming in arteries from constant inflammation, if you could measure the loss of muscle fibers after months of immobility, you would understand why I refuse to call depression a purely mental illness. It is a full-body disease. And once you understand that, you realize something else. The clock starts ticking the moment it takes hold. The longer it goes untreated, the more damage it does, and the harder it becomes to reverse. But here's the part that should give you hope. Just as depression can change the body for the worse, treatment can change it for the better. Hormone levels can normalize, inflammation can decrease, the brain can regrow connections, muscles can be rebuilt, the body can remember how to heal. But to get there, you have to see it for what it is. You have to stop blaming yourself. Stop telling yourself you're just weak. Stop believing that nothing can be done. Because if you keep believing those lies, the body will keep betraying you until you believe there's no point in fighting back. And when you believe that, depression wins. Now you know what it does to the body. But that's only half the truth. The real question is, how does it get in without being noticed? What opens the door for it to enter your life, so quietly, so invisibly, that by the time you realize it's there, it's already in control? That answer is coming. And once you hear it, you will never look at your daily life the same way again. Depression doesn't just appear out of thin air. It doesn't knock loudly at the door and announce itself. In seniors, it slips in through cracks so small you don't even notice them at first. It builds itself out of moments that seem harmless, ordinary even. It uses the weight of life itself as camouflage, until one day you're carrying something you can't see but feel in every step you take. And if you're not looking closely, you might never realize the triggers that set it in motion until it's already too late. Sometimes, it starts with loss. Loss of a spouse, a partner, a lifelong friend. The kind of loss that leaves a silence so heavy you can almost hear it pressing against the walls. You wake up, and the other side of the bed is cold. The house feels larger than it used to. The little routines you shared, morning coffee together, evening walks, even the way you used to argue over trivial things, vanish overnight. At first, you tell yourself it's just grief. That time will take care of it. But grief in seniors has a dangerous way of lingering, slowly eroding the desire to engage with the world, turning into something deeper, darker and harder to name. Other times, the trigger is loneliness that doesn't come from death, but from distance. Children grow up, move away, start their own lives. Friends relocate, or pass on. The phone that used to ring every day, now sits still. Days go by without a single conversation. You start talking to yourself more, not because you've lost touch with reality, but because the sound of your own voice is the only one you hear. You convince yourself you've gotten used to the quiet, but the truth is, the human brain is wired for connection, and when that connection is cut off, your mental health begins to fracture. Then there are the physical triggers, the hidden illnesses and conditions that set the stage for depression without you even realizing it. Chronic pain is one of the most powerful. It grinds you down, steals your energy, and makes every small task feel monumental. After weeks or months of unrelenting discomfort, your brain starts to adapt in the worst possible way, by lowering your overall motivation and pleasure response. Your world becomes smaller, not just because of the pain, but because your brain no longer believes joy is possible. Hormonal changes also play a role. Thyroid disorders, common in older adults, can mimic depression perfectly, slowing down thought, sapping energy, and causing weight changes that further feed the cycle of low self-esteem and withdrawal. Low vitamin D, often caused by spending less time outdoors, can alter brain chemistry in subtle but devastating ways. Deficiencies in vitamin B12 or folate can lead to fatigue, confusion and mood changes. And yet these conditions are often missed because the symptoms overlap so closely with what people assume is just getting older. Medications are another invisible trigger. Blood pressure drugs, certain painkillers, sleep aids, even some over-the-counter remedies, can have mood-altering side effects. The tricky part is that seniors are often on multiple medications, and the slow buildup of these side effects can be misattributed to aging or unrelated health issues. I've seen patients struggle for years without realizing that a small adjustment to their prescriptions could change everything. Life transitions are a quiet but powerful factor. Retirement, for example, is painted as a reward for decades of hard work, but for many it's a sudden loss of structure, purpose, and social interaction. You wake up without a schedule, days blend into each other. The sense of being needed, of contributing to something bigger than yourself, fades. And in that space, depression finds an opening. Even changes in living arrangements can set it off. Moving from your home to an assisted living facility, no matter how comfortable, can feel like a loss of independence. The unfamiliar environment, new routines, and the constant reminder of aging can chip away at self-worth. These changes may seem small from the outside, but internally they can be seismic. There are also the micro-triggers, the everyday moments that pile up until they form something overwhelming. The frustration of not remembering a word mid-sentence, the embarrassment of forgetting a name, the small pang when you realize you can't do something as easily as before. Each moment alone is manageable, but together they become a steady drip, wearing away at your confidence and reshaping how you see yourself. The worst part is that many of these triggers overlap. You might be dealing with chronic pain, loneliness, and a medication side effect all at once. They feed each other, creating a feedback loop that accelerates the descent into depression. And because the changes happen gradually, neither you nor the people around you recognize them as a single treatable problem. Instead, they get dismissed as just part of life now. I've seen this happen in slow motion. An active social man develops arthritis in his knees. He stops golfing, then stops going to the weekly coffee group. The pain keeps him home more, so he sees fewer people. His energy drops, his appetite changes, and he starts sleeping later. When asked, he says he's just resting his joints, but underneath, depression has already taken hold. By the time he realizes something is wrong, it's not just his mood, it's his body, his relationships, his entire way of living that's been reshaped by an illness he didn't even know was growing inside him. It's the invisibility that makes these triggers so dangerous. You can see a broken bone on an X-ray. You can measure blood sugar or blood pressure, but you can't measure the exact moment when isolation turns into hopelessness, when grief hardens into despair, or when a side effect crosses the line into something that changes who you are. Depression doesn't arrive with a bang. It seeps in like water through a crack in the foundation, slowly undermining everything until the whole structure is unstable. And yet, just because these triggers are invisible, doesn't mean they can't be intercepted. The key is awareness, knowing what to look for before the damage is done. It's asking the uncomfortable questions, noticing the small shifts in behavior, and refusing to accept just getting older as an explanation for every change. It's understanding that your brain and body are connected, and that what happens in one will inevitably affect the other. The reality is, none of us can avoid every loss, every change, every health condition that comes with age. But we can learn to see them for what they are, potential openings for a disease that thrives in the shadows. And when you see the opening, you have a choice. You can leave it unguarded, or you can close it before depression steps through. But here's where the truth gets darker. Even when you know the triggers, even when you're aware of the risks, depression has a way of convincing you that you're fine, that nothing's wrong. That's the disease's final trick. It makes you an accomplice in your own decline. And unless you know how to break that illusion, the triggers will keep finding their way in, again and again. That illusion is what I'm going to tear apart next. Because once you see how depression hides behind the mask of normal life, you'll never mistake it for aging again. And when you can see it clearly, you can finally fight back. The turning point never comes with a trumpet blast or a lightning strike. It comes quietly, often disguised as the smallest, most unremarkable moment, a sentence from a friend you haven't seen in months. A glance in the mirror when you don't recognize the eyes looking back at you. A question from a doctor that hits harder than expected. For some, it's the moment they realize that the person they've been living as is not the person they used to be. For others, it's simply a moment when the weight feels unbearable, and they know they can't carry it alone anymore. Depression in seniors is highly treatable, but that truth is hidden behind decades of stigma, pride, and silence. We grow up in a world that teaches us to endure pain, to be resilient, to never ask for help unless it's a matter of life and death. But here's what most people never learn. Depression is a matter of life and death, not in a poetic way, but in the most clinical, biological, measurable sense. Left untreated, it chips away at physical health until the body begins to break down. Treat it, and you can not only save years of life, you can make those years worth living. The first step is recognition, and it's not as easy as it sounds. You have to be willing to see depression for what it is, an illness, not a flaw. That means stripping away the idea that feeling hopeless is somehow your fault, that it's weakness, that you should just snap out of it. Imagine telling someone with pneumonia to just breathe harder, or telling someone with a broken leg to simply walk it off. It's absurd. Yet this is how society treats mental illness in older adults, even though the damage it causes to the body is every bit as real. Once you recognize it, you need to talk to a doctor, not just any doctor, but one who takes late-life depression seriously. This isn't about a quick conversation at the end of an annual checkup. It's about a full evaluation, blood work, medication review, and in some cases brain imaging. Depression in seniors can be triggered or worsened by physical health issues, thyroid disorders, nutritional deficiencies, chronic inflammation, and if those aren't addressed, no amount of therapy or medication will be fully effective. This is why a proper diagnosis is critical. For some, treatment may involve antidepressant medication. The idea of taking a pill for your mood can be unsettling, especially if you've avoided psychiatric medication your whole life. But modern antidepressants are not the blunt instruments they once were. They're carefully targeted, often with fewer side effects, and in many cases they don't just improve mood, they improve sleep, concentration, and even physical energy. But medication alone is rarely enough. It's just one piece of a larger strategy. Therapy is another piece, and here is where many seniors hesitate. They think therapy is for the young, for people in crisis, for those still shaping their lives. But therapy in later life is about reclaiming control. It's about understanding how loss, change, and physical health intersect with mood. It's about finding new purpose when old roles have disappeared. Cognitive behavioral therapy, problem-solving therapy, even newer approaches like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy can be incredibly effective, especially when tailored to the unique challenges of aging. Lifestyle changes are the often overlooked third piece of treatment, but they can be the most transformative. Physical movement, even in small doses, sends powerful signals to the brain that disrupt the biology of depression. Walking in the morning light boosts serotonin and regulates circadian rhythms. Strength training, even with light weights, helps reverse muscle loss and increases energy. And these physical benefits feed directly into emotional resilience. Nutrition is another critical factor. Diets high in processed foods and low in nutrient-rich options can increase inflammation, worsen mood, and slow recovery. A diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids, leafy greens, berries, and lean proteins can support brain health and stabilize mood. This isn't about trendy diets. It's about giving your brain and body the building blocks they need to heal. Then there's social connection, perhaps the most underestimated tool in fighting depression. Human beings are wired for interaction, and isolation is a biological stressor. Reconnecting doesn't mean forcing yourself into large gatherings. If that's not your style, it can be as simple as a weekly phone call, a book club, a shared hobby, even digital communication. Video calls, online interest groups can help re-establish a sense of belonging. The turning point isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a small, deliberate choice, repeated daily until it becomes a habit. The walk you take even when you don't feel like it. The meal you cook instead of skipping dinner. The phone call you make even when you'd rather stay silent. Every one of those choices is a defiance against the biology of depression. Every one of them is proof that the disease hasn't taken everything. I've seen patients who were nearly swallowed whole by depression make extraordinary recoveries once they accepted help. One man in his 70s, retired and isolated, began walking around his block twice a day. It started as a way to pass the time, but soon he was talking to neighbors again. He joined a local chess group. Within months, his posture was straighter, his voice stronger, his energy noticeably higher. The pain in his joints eased. He laughed more. When I asked him what changed, he didn't say the medication or the therapy, though both helped. He said, "I decided I wasn't done yet." That's the heart of the turning point. The decision to fight. To stop accepting the narrative that decline is inevitable. To refuse to let the illness dictate the rest of your life. Once you make that choice, every tool, medical, psychological, social, becomes a weapon in your favor. And the longer you use them, the stronger you become. But there's something you need to understand. The turning point is fragile. In the beginning, it's easy to fall back into old patterns. You might have days when you feel the weight return, when the effort seems pointless. This is normal. It doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're fighting something that's been building for years, and it takes time to dismantle it. The key is not to stop when it feels hard. Momentum builds slowly, but once it starts, it carries you further than you think. There is no shame in needing help. In fact, asking for help is one of the most courageous things you can do. It means you've stopped hiding from the truth. It means you've decided that your story isn't over. It means you're ready to turn what could have been the final quiet fade out of your life into the start of a new chapter. And here's the most important truth of all. Recovery is possible at any age. Neuroplasticity doesn't expire. Muscles can be rebuilt. Energy can return. Joy can be felt again, even after years of numbness. But only if you take that first step. Only if you decide that you're not going to let depression write your ending for you. For some, that first step is calling their doctor. For others, it's confiding in a friend. For you, it might be as simple as opening the blinds tomorrow morning and letting the light in. But whatever it is, take it. Because the alternative, the quiet, steady erosion of your health, your independence, your sense of self, is not inevitable. It's preventable. And once you take that first step, you'll notice something. The world doesn't look quite as dull. You'll hear your own voice sounding a little more alive. The food tastes better. The silence feels less heavy. These are the signs that the tide is turning, that the disease is losing ground. You are not too old. You are not too far gone. You are not beyond help. The turning point is not some mystical moment granted to a lucky few. It's a choice you can make today, right now. And once you make it, you've already taken the first step toward reclaiming the years that depression tried to steal. But here's the thing. Knowing you can turn it around is one thing. Understanding exactly how to keep that momentum, how to prevent depression from clawing its way back in, is another. And the strategies for that are not what most people think. The real protection comes from something deeper, something that reaches into the very way you live and connect with the world. That's what comes next. And when you hear it, you'll understand why the fight doesn't just stop when you start to feel better. It's only beginning. They told you it was just a bad mood, that it would pass. They told you to think positive, to keep yourself busy, to get out more. But deep down, you knew this was something far greater, far heavier, far more dangerous. And now here we are, at the point where silence can no longer be the answer. Because the truth is, the Great Depression in seniors isn't just an emotional battle. It's a war for your life, your dignity, your very identity. We have walked through the shadows together, unmasking how it begins quietly, how the body betrays itself, how invisible triggers chip away at the mind, and how one choice, one moment can become the turning point. But now this is where it becomes real. This is where knowing isn't enough. This is where you decide whether this ends in recovery, or in a slow fade into the statistics no one likes to talk about. I'm not here to sugarcoat it. You are facing a threat that preys on hesitation. Depression after 60 doesn't wait politely while you think it over. It doesn't care about your schedule. It doesn't pause for birthdays or family reunions. It advances relentlessly, embedding itself deeper into the wiring of your brain, robbing you of vitality, sleep, appetite, memory, hope, and here's the worst part. It's patient. It knows that the longer it lingers, the harder it is to fight. That's why the time to act is not tomorrow, it's now. So how do you fight something so embedded? You do it with precision, with intention, with the same discipline you'd bring to surviving a battlefield. Because make no mistake, this is a battlefield, and you are the soldier. Step 1. Break the silence. I know the voice in your head says, don't burden anyone. That's depression talking, not you. Tell one person, just one. It could be your doctor, your spouse, your oldest friend. The moment you speak it, the illusion of being alone begins to crumble. Step 2. Get assessed. Don't just hope it gets better. Depression has physical fingerprints, hormonal imbalances, inflammation markers, neural changes that can be measured, tracked, addressed. Demand a thorough workup, blood tests, cognitive screening, medication reviews. Because sometimes what feels like emotional collapse is triggered by something as specific as a vitamin deficiency, or a side effect from a pill you've been told is harmless. Step 3. Build your defense team. A doctor alone is not enough. You need layers. Therapy for the mind, physical activity for the body, social engagement for the spirit, nutrition tailored to stabilize mood and energy. Every one of these is a weapon, and you need them all working together, not in isolation. Step 4. Cut the silent assassins. You know them. Alcohol to relax, endless hours in front of the TV, junk food that spikes your blood sugar and leaves you drained, social media doom scrolling. Each one feels harmless in the moment. Each one is a slow poison. Remove them, and you remove fuel from depression's fire. Step 5. Anchor yourself to purpose. Depression thrives in the absence of meaning. Volunteer, mentor, create, teach, build something with your hands, learn something new. Purpose is the rope you tie to the shore so you don't drift into the abyss. But here's the part no one tells you. This isn't a straight line. You will have days where it feels like you're losing again. Days when the old heaviness returns without warning. That's not failure. That's the enemy testing your defenses. And every time you choose to get up again, you send a message. You will not have me. I want you to picture something right now. Picture the version of yourself 6 months from today, if you take these steps. Stronger, clearer, sharper, laughing without forcing it, waking up with something to look forward to. And then picture the version of yourself if you don't. Which one deserves to win? Understand this: people who beat depression in their later years aren't the lucky ones. They're the prepared ones. They didn't wait for motivation to arrive. They moved while the enemy was still advancing. They didn't just think about it. They acted. And you right now are at the same crossroads. One road leads to reclaiming yourself, the other to a slow erasure. You already know which one you want. So here's what I need you to do next. Not later, not after you think about it. Now, write in the comments the single biggest change you are willing to make starting today. Name it, claim it, commit to it publicly. Why? Because when you speak it out loud, when you see it in writing, you've taken the first step from thought to action. And that step is everything. Then come back tomorrow, because in the next part, I'm going to show you exactly how to strip depression of its strongest weapon, the one it uses to keep even the most determined fighters from winning. And if you think you've heard it before, you haven't. Not like this. Now, go. Break the silence. Name your step, and prepare for what's coming next.